Hello aviators, welcome back to my Ace Combat lore series. Today we're exploring a pivotal character from Ace Combat 5 and 7, 48th President of the Ocean Federation, Vincent Harling. Let's begin. Not much is known about Harling before his first election, and we don't know much more about the state of the Ocean political landscape at the time. Osea, in general, seems to mirror the United States in many ways. Bright Hill is the obvious analog for the White House, for example, and they're seen meddling in other countries' affairs throughout the series, as exemplified by the IUN. Like the United States, Osea held a presidential election in 2004. Harling won a majority with 44,312,243 votes. Interestingly, compared with the real-world 2004 US election, this is a significantly lesser number of votes. George W. Bush received 62,040,610 total votes. We don't know what Harling's policies were or which end of the political spectrum he landed in, but obviously he was saying the right things to get elected twice. Early in his presidency, Harling inherited a few problems. First, there was the reconstruction of South Belka and its integration into the Ocean Federation. Then there was Usea and its continent-wide war that recently erupted. Harling, a vocal pacifist, chose to stay out of the Usean conflict and instead focus on Osea's internal affairs. Following the Balkan War, Osea and Yuktobania were on friendly terms as they were allies in the war. Development of the Arcbird, beginning in 1999, was actually aided by Yuktobania. They provided the technology for a high-output laser for destroying meteorites. Continuing this cooperation, and after massive cuts to the Ocean defense budget, both countries constructed the Bassett Space Center, as well as the Mass Driver, a technology once a closely guarded Ocean secret. With the construction of the Space Center, both countries were poised to accelerate their space exploration technology. In 2008, Harling was re-elected with a higher majority of 48.5 million votes. His VP, who we only know by his surname Appleruth, was a nationalist and hawk, though there isn't confirmation that this was publicly known during the election campaign. Though if it was known, this choice of VP would be a very strange counterbalance to Harling's history of pacifism. That same year, following a terrorist attack that cancelled the 2007 G7 summit, Harling hosted the summit on board the Arcbird, so it could be in a, quote, place transcending national borders, end quote. The FCU, Osea, Yuktobania, Verisa, the Republic of Ania, the Nordlands, and Aruja were in attendance. There, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was possibly signed, ratified, or proposed, it isn't quite clear. But the summit promoted nuclear non-proliferation, definitely a trademark Vincent Harling action. As well, the Secondary Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty was discussed, another initiative aimed to reduce weapons-grade plutonium. In September 2010, Yuktobanian aircraft violated Ocean airspace. War Dog Squadron, the protagonist from Ace 5, were on training maneuvers at the time and were the closest to the intruding force. Thus, they were ordered to respond to the incoming threat. Command back at Sand Island gave War Dog an incorrect altitude of the incoming bogies, which contributed to most of the squadron, who were just cadets, getting killed. President Harling chose to keep the situation quiet and did not have an immediate response to the attack. A few days later, Yuktobania officially declared war on Osea. Wow, what a concept, declaring war. Simultaneously, air raiding St. Hewlett Harbor to knock out Osea's navy. Present for this attack was the super submarine Synfaxi, which launched 2 airburst missiles, destroying many Ocean aircraft and sinking 2 carriers, leaving the Kestrel as the only operational carrier in the region. Yet another comparison with the United States can be drawn here, because yes, this attack on the Ocean Navy is very Pearl Harbor coded. Though it isn't quite one-to-one, as the Kestrel is present for the battle from the beginning, unlike the Enterprise, which was not in Pearl Harbor when the attack began. After the attack at St. Hewlett, Harling authorized the launch of the Arcbird with its laser module attached. The intention being that the Arcbird could counter the Synfaxi's airburst missiles. Around this time, President Harling decided to meet with Yuktobanian Prime Minister Seryoja Viktorovich Nikanor in the neutral Usean country of North Point. After all, to Harling, a solid 15 years of cooperation between the two countries was suddenly and unexpectedly turned on its head for no clear reason. October 22, 2010. Harling makes his way towards the North Point on board a C-5 transport, call sign Mother Goose 1. This plane did not have an active IFF, nor was it clearly marked as a presidential craft in order to maintain secrecy. Likely because of the lack of IFF, OCS automated coastal defense system marked the transport as an enemy and fired upon it. On top of it being damaged by friendly fire, there were spies on board who killed the pilots. After a scuffle, the spies were subdued, and Harling, along with his secretary, took over the controls. Luckily for Harling, War Dog Squadron was on patrol in the area, and they were able to escort Mother Goose 1 through the remaining radar net, as well as defending the transport from incoming Yuktobanian aircraft and aid in their emergency crash landing. However, after the crash landing, the 84 92nd Squadron showed up under the guise of assisting. The 84 92nd Squadron, of course, are actually Belkan operatives working from inside both the Osean and Yuktobanian militaries, known as the Grey Men, with the goal of having both countries destroy each other. It was at this time that Harling was kidnapped and held prisoner in Styr Castle, Belka. All of this was performed in secret, of course, and thus began Harling's lengthy and mysterious disappearance from the public eye. So, Harling's vice president, Appleruth. Remember that guy? Yeah, he assumes power and keeps the war going because he's also in league with the Grey Men, the secret Belkan cabal manipulating governments from the shadows. The war continues to escalate. Eventually, the intelligence ship OFS Andromeda picks up a signal in Belkan, which, after decryption, informs them of President Harling's location in South Belka. By now, War Dog Squadron has been killed and is about to become the Ghost of Rosgrees, but that's a story for another time. December 9th, 2010. Sea Goblin, an elite Osean Marine Corps unit on board the Kestrel, is deployed to rescue Harling along with War Dog. The Grey Men threw everything they had at Sea Goblin, but it wasn't enough with War Dog flying above them, and Harling was successfully rescued. Over the following weeks, Harling would command the Rosgrees Squadron in operations against the Grey Men. Having received a coded message from an unknown source, the crew discovers that the Grey Men have attained 2 nuclear warheads, eventually leading to the destruction of the Arkberg to stop a nuclear attack on Yuktobania. Following this, and after freeing Prime Minister Nicanor, who was similarly held prisoner, Harling attempted a broadcast to reveal the truth of the conflict. This was deemed propaganda and blocked by Osean forces, but Harling's appeal made it to some Osean and Yuktobanian forces who joined the Kestrel fleet. After, on December 30th, Harling and Nicanor traveled to the Osean capital Elred to hold peace talks, and to let the world know that they were still alive, as well as reveal what was really happening. After, with the Rosgrees Squadron having dealt with multiple threats, the Grey Men's plans were foiled and the Circum-Pacific War came to a close. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. I hope you're enjoying it. Please do the usual YouTube stuff. Leave a like, subscribe, comment something, or else Belka is going to invade your house. I have an additional thing to shamelessly plug, though. Did y'all know that I multi-stream to Twitch as well as YouTube? Should you be interested and Twitch is your preferred platform, give me a follow over there, because I need it. Though it isn't clear how Osea and Yuktobania's relationship changed after the war, we can assume that relations improved. President Harling went right back to focusing on space development, this time in Yuja. Having laid the groundwork for the space elevator at the 2008 G7 summit, Harling pledged joint development on the elevator project towards the end of his presidency. After he was out of office, he continued supporting the project in some kind of administrative role, and it would become his legacy. In 2013, during the Osean Federation Supreme Council meeting, Harling announced that all files related to the Belkan conflict, another name for the Circum-Pacific War, would be declassified in 2020. We've yet to see how this plays out, but perhaps it will be touched upon in AC-8. The following years would be relatively quiet for Harling. Likely sometime in 2018, construction of the space elevator would be completed. Despite being for Yuja's benefit, production of solar energy actually being the primary function of the elevator, Erusia was very unhappy with the situation, and in typical Erusian fashion, they saw the space elevator as a tool for Osea to gain influence over Yusian states. Erusian nationalists within the military would eventually convince the King of Erusia to begin a war against Osea, And on May 15th, 2019, Erusia would launch a surprise UAV attack against strategic Ocean military forces, and they would capture the space elevator, as well as taking control of the arsenal birds protecting it. Harling evaded Erusian forces for a few weeks with the help of an Ocean military officer, Colonel Johnson. On June 6th, IUN and Ocean forces would attempt to recapture the space elevator and rescue former President Harling. Harling and Johnson would escape using an MV-22 aircraft, designated Mother Goose 1, but it was damaged in the ensuing air battle, and Colonel Johnson died. Harling took over the controls, but instead of continuing the escape, he turned the aircraft around and went back towards the space elevator. IUN Allied forces tried to protect Harling despite this sudden change in direction, but he would be shot down and killed by a missile supposedly fired by the player character, Trigger. While Trigger did not actually fire the missile that killed Harling, it is not clear whether it was an Erusian UAV with a spoofed IFF, or a human Erusian pilot also with a spoofed IFF. Vincent Harling is probably one of the most consequential characters in the entire Ace Combat series, though he's really only in 2 games. Of course, he's a very important presence in Ace 5, since he's the president and a central character, but he also is indirectly responsible for the events of Ace 7. I can't help but think about what kind of person Vincent Harling is. For a politician, he seems too good that we have no idea what his policies are outside of space development and forging friendly relations with other countries. Space development, while very cool, is also very expensive. We don't know if that money could be better spent on, say, Ocean healthcare or infrastructure. However, advanced space development will be quite relevant later in Ace Combat's timeline, so I suppose that isn't too surprising. Meanwhile, Harling's penchant for peaceful relations with other countries is generally admirable. We can see that he isn't afraid to retaliate. Obviously, he does this after the Yuktibanians attack out of nowhere, but he does quickly seek a dialogue to end the war. Add to this a plan to build a space elevator in Usha, a huge engineering project that really doesn't have a lot of benefit for Osea itself. In real life, I could see this being a very contentious use of resources, but it cannot be denied that there is a altruistic intent behind it. And if the timeline generally doesn't change, Osea just won't have a lot of influence in Usha. There is no power play, no political meddling that happens. Yet. Vincent Harling seems like a nice guy. While that's sometimes a bit of a loaded statement, I really mean it. He seems like a generally pleasant dude. Perhaps his political success was really built on the concept of kindness, making Strange Real a weirdly more hopeful place than the real world it's supposed to be based on.